Hi, I'm Metta Spencer, and today is Sunday, April 25th, 2021. And because it's the end of the month, the last Sunday in the month, we're having one of Project Save the World's regular monthly global town halls. And we always invite people to take part in this conversation, people in every part of the world who are working on one of the 6 global threats that we're concerned with: war and weapons, global warming, famine, pandemics, radioactive contamination, or cyber risks. Now we're underway. I was really pleased with Biden's statement that the U.S. is upping its aspirations or commitments to get things under control by a much quicker deadline as far as global warming is concerned.
Well, I was on a very interesting webinar yesterday or the day before from Massachusetts, and they've got a very, very active and progressive group of ICANN activists there. So I found that quite encouraging.
Canada's primary science program. It ended yesterday with a woman talking about solar geoengineering, and she was kind of neither rabidly pro nor rabidly against, but more soberly assessing it. And I thought anybody soberly assessing that is better than almost anything else that happens.
I think actually take different pieces of it, because I think to just call things global, geoengineering is just too sweep a thing, because there are things that I think are really valuable potentially, and others that I would be more apprehensive about.
And that pretty much was the last thing she said. Pieces
really?
Of it.
Well, geoengineering that I would be most likely to be in favor of is, I think at the moment, really too early to take a position, but it would be something to try to reduce that methane emission, because I think that's really.
I think I would agree, and I think that was essentially the thrust of what you said. But I've got to go back to the web and hear what really was said.
Covered or the Biden summit, or any impressions one way or another?
We are encouraged that we've had a good number of people sign up for our 4-part course on nuclear weapons. We've done the course, I think, run the whole course 6 or 7 times thus far, and we're offering again in May. And you can choose either Tuesdays or Saturdays.
Austria is continuing to make its preparations to hold the first conference of states parties of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons in January of next year. Because under the treaty, the first conference of states parties is supposed to take place within 1 year of entry into force. So as you know, the TPNW entered into force on the 22nd of January this year. So they're hoping to hold this conference in the beginning of January. The president of the conference will be Ambassador Alexander Kement from the Austrian Foreign Ministry. He's also written his book on how the TPNW came about and how it was negotiated. It will probably be published next month sometime. So that's the first piece of good news. Second, now for about 2 weeks in Vienna, we've had these proximity talks or indirect talks involving Iran, the United States, and the European countries on bringing back the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA, on Iran's nuclear program. And although the Iranians and the Americans are not talking directly, the Europeans are shuttling back and forth carrying proposals. So they have set up 2 working groups. The first working group is on the actions in the nuclear field that Iran would take to go back to within the limits of the JCPOA. And the second working group is on the removal of sanctions on Iran by the United States. The working group on nuclear has made more progress because that's relatively simple in identifying those actions which bring Iran back within the limits of the JCPOA. They can ship out the excess amount of low enriched uranium that they have to bring them to the limit of 300 kilograms. They can also shut down the centrifuges that are above the limit in the JCPOA, and so on. But the removal of sanctions is becoming still a problematic issue. The U.S. still keeps on insisting that Iran must first take verifiable steps on going back into the JCPOA before they will remove the sanctions. The Iranians say once bitten, twice shy. The last time in 2015, we Iranians, according to them, they took the first steps, and then the U.S. really didn't remove all the sanctions, and nor did the EU. So they want the United States to take the first step. Fortunately, the head of the U.S. delegation is a diplomat scholar called Robert Malley. His last position was head of the International Crisis Group. And in January, the International Crisis Group published a good report, which you can find on their webpage. And their Malley's position is that's closer to the Iranian position, but he still doesn't have support from Biden and from Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, and the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan. However, despite the sabotage at the Iranian nuclear facility, which took place on the 10th of April, where, according to the Iranians, the Israelis successfully managed to smuggle in explosives which destroyed the electricity supply for the Natanz enrichment plant. The Israeli attack on the Iranian nuclear facility actually backfired because the Iranians, in response, are enriching now up to 60%. As opposed to 3.67%, which they were obligated to. They then upped it to 5% and then upped it to 20% in response to Trump's maximum pressure on Iran. And also now, 2 weeks after the attack, there are more centrifuges operating in Iran, enriching uranium. So it shows that attacking nuclear facilities, even though it may be in a country with which other countries are not in agreement with, attacking nuclear facilities that are under IAEA inspection is not something to be encouraged. It's sort of interesting that despite Canada, United States, and others over the last decade speaking very loudly on increasing nuclear security, security of nuclear facilities, guarding against sabotage, guarding against cyber threats, were all silent when it came to the supposedly Israeli attack on the Iranian nuclear facility, which follows the cyber attack which they did nearly 10 years ago.
Excuse me, but has the U.S. denied flatly that they were aware of it or in cahoots with Israel on that, or are they just hoping that nobody will ask?
Well, people have asked because on the day on which the sabotage took place, the U.S. Defense Secretary was visiting Israel. And according to news reports, he was given a briefing because by that time the attack, or during his visit, the attack had already transpired. So he says that the Defense Secretary, General Austin, he had no advance knowledge. Reports from Washington are not so clear, although they are projecting a sense that they didn't appreciate the attack, particularly given that these talks were going on in Vienna, and that such a action would be counterproductive, which is exactly what the Israelis want. They want to disrupt any possible agreement between the U.S. and Iran and bringing back the JCPOA. The Saudis are also very opposed to this, as of course as are the Israelis. But if the reporting is correct that we hear, the talks are still going on, and they will resume after 1 week's pause. So next week or this coming week, they will not be discussing, but they will resume the week following. And thus far,
well, it's obvious to me that this was a very bad idea, or rather that the Israel really intended to cause trouble and to break up any progress, prevent any progress on that conference. Is there any conceivable argument to the contrary?
Yes, the supporters of Israel would argue that by doing this attack and hoping to destroy a large number of centrifuges at Natanz, that would weaken the negotiating hand of Iran. But as things happened, it didn't transpire that way. It also seems from the latest report from the IAEA, which is not a public report, that the number of machines that are operating after the attack are more, a greater number, about 1,000 more than were before the attack. And some machines were in the same formation as they were in July 2015. So it means that the attack was not successful in its objectives.
Okay. All right. Well, it looks to me like it was clear that this was something the U.S. shouldn't appreciate if they really were meaning business. But I'm not sure. Now, why is Biden or why are Blinken and whoever's making these decisions? Why are they so shy about getting? It's everybody knows it was Trump who screwed the whole thing up. And you would think that it would be easy for Biden to say, well, it's not my fault and we shouldn't have done it. And therefore, we're going to just we're going to, take responsibility for having messed things up. The US did it. And so we will go back to the conditions that we set in the first place and live with those.
Well, in my view, people have a rather optimistic view of Biden. If you look at my article, which I published in December or January, it is called Great Expectations, the Coming of the Messiah and the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And here I was bringing up the record of Biden during the Obama administration, where the Obama administration voted against a number of progressive arms control resolutions in the UN General Assembly. And so because people hated Trump so much, they were looking at Biden as this messiah and everything would change. And that hasn't. And you see that, he has, people may like or not like Putin. He has called him a killer. He has insulted the Chinese president, but then he still wants to do business with them. He has a record of shooting from the hip. He has a record of speaking without considering the implications of what he's saying. And now he's president. So although some of the things he has done in reversing Trump's bad actions are to be welcomed, I wouldn't put that much faith in him in being this messiah that all of us were expecting him to be. So it's not a surprise that he is still acting tough. And I also note that there is this tendency of every American president when they take over to go and attack somebody. And so he already ordered a missile strike on Syria in February to show that he's a real man and he's a real president and the United States is not to be trifled with. So these things keep on continuing and we are where we are.
Yeah, I agree with Tariq 100%. I never had any confidence in Biden. He was, out of all the people running for president in the US here, he was the most conservative. He is very, very conservative on economic issues. He's been just absolutely subservient to Wall Street and big business throughout his long career in Congress. When he became president, he appointed a lot of war hawks to powerful positions in his administration. His Secretary of Defense was a recently retired four-star general who was serving on the board of directors of Raytheon, one of the biggest weapons manufacturers selling to the Pentagon.
Put out a bit of good news. In the last week, there have been several Zooms led by Indigenous women leaders, both in Canada and in the United States, and some of them included women from both South America and Asia. And boy, oh boy, those, or maybe I should say girl, oh girl, those were powerful women speaking directly to a lot of the problems that interest this group. And I was just bowled over by some of the things they've said.
Mohammed, yes, tell us more.
Yeah, is there any way I could talk about my back home country, Bangladesh, what's going on over there?
Bangladesh. Oh, yes. Tell us what is going on in Bangladesh.
And now people are struggling with COVID-19 and they don't have enough test, vaccination, and millions of people without job. The present government also using, the cyber war.
Did you say cyber war?
Like they use cyber intelligence tools from Canada, Israel, German, Hungary. So whatever you talk, they hack your phone. The whole of our country they control by CCTV. So they control movement who running like any protest against the government. They take them under custody.
No, wait a minute. I didn't get all of that, but I want to verify that what I think I understood. Are you saying that in Bangladesh, the government has such cyber capacity that they can monitor the behavior of ordinary citizens?
Yes.
By what? By tracking their cell phones, or
what is
it? This is, by the way, this is an amazing fact, if that's true, that the government has that kind of sophistication so they can actually monitor and repress. Are they repressing freedom of speech and assembly and so on?
Yes.
Who would be the victims of this kind of mistreatment?
So, like, let's say I am one of the victim. I live in Toronto. If I write down anything in Toronto in Facebook or Twitter against what government they're doing, corruption, illegal activities, or they don't do real measures to control COVID-19. So they track you and they kind of thread your family in back home. And those people living in back home, they are kind of self-censorship. So media, critics, or politician, or the journalist, they put many journalists in prison, critics, and they using actually is called surveillance tools, CC camera. All over the city, if you go to Bangladesh, you will see all over the city in district, they put a CC camera. So they see where are you going, like another China.
Wow. This is to me very astonishing, because I imagined that, like, I'd heard about that China was doing things like that, but I imagined that only a very rich and technologically sophisticated country with a lot of money and facilities would be able to do a thing like that. But you personally feel vulnerable that your actions are being followed?
Yes. And the government of Bangladesh, what they are doing, the millions of people have no job, shelter, education. So what they are doing, they are showing outside the world that we are doing a lot of things for my country. We are implementing sustainable development goals, all in the paper, in the book. It's not real history. Real history, people are suffering to get a job. There is no real resource available for the maximum people. So those people are associated with the government, politics, irregularities. They are getting all the benefits of the government services. So if you say, oh, my area, in my community, somebody is dying without food or not getting COVID treatment, or they don't have any job, injustice going on. So they track you because you are talking with another person, right? So let's say one of the person he is victim, he call a lawyer or any organization, I am a vulnerable, I need help, this and that. So the government, police, and the agencies, they track your phone and they find you, oh, that person called from that place. So they go to that home and they arrest you and they put you in it's called Digital Security Act. They create a Digital Security Act. So you write down anything in the Twitter, Facebook, or whatever you say against the government in anywhere, media. So they will track you with these surveillance tools.
And out 2 hours ago, I was reading, I think the New York Times or something, I don't know what I was reading, but it said that as of yesterday or today, the Indian government has cracked down on social media. Anything that is critical of the government is going to be forbidden and probably blocked. I don't know how, but that this is happening because the pandemic is so much out of control there that it is. They say that the number of deaths is much greater than the government is reporting. So the government doesn't want that to be known, and therefore they're suppressing the news, the information. Now, if it's only today or yesterday that the government of India has taken that drastic measure, what I hear you saying is that the government of Bangladesh was already doing that. Is that right?
Yeah, they're doing this one since 2009.
In our hearts, we have solidarity, but what can we do with
You need to create a
hands, our money, or our voices? What can we do?
We need international sanction against even lot of corrupt leaders. They immigrant to Canada, Europe. They bought billions of dollars to this country, buying big house when people are dying without food, shelter.
Okay, thank you, Mohammed. I want to ask some other people to comment possibly on this. Now, I believe that Barbara and Nahaela have both entered things in the chat box.
I just did a very quick Google search and I found a document from Human Rights Watch from January last year, 8th of January, and it links to Bangladesh online surveillance control. So
what is the drift of the article?
Well, the drift of the article is that a publication called Netra News was the latest to be blocked in a free speech crackdown. Yeah, and I can just maybe read the first short paragraph. Mm-hmm. Bangladesh authorities are blocking access to online news sites in violation of the right to free watch Saturday. So that was January 8th. Methods to block or conduct surveillance on internet traffic and regulate online news sites without a sufficient legal framework to protect rights to privacy, expression, and access to information.
Seems to be confirming what we've heard. I see we have a Mr. Davidson, I presume, from Kenya. Has joined us. I always like to welcome people from far away out of this continent, especially. Mr. Davidson, I guess it's Mr. I can't see you very well at all. Can you say hello to us, who you are? You have to unmute yourself. Hello.
Hello, Jumbo, everyone.
Hello.
Yes, I am Davidson. I'm a man. So I am he or she or he or him.
You're a he, and you're a he in Kenya. Are you in Kenya?
Yes. And yes, I'm in Kenya, in East Africa.
I can get a good look at you now. Very good, sir. So, what do you have to tell us about what is going on in Kenya these days? How are things there? What is your city? What city are you in?
I'm in the suburb, I'm in the rural, in the countryside, in the western part of Kenya, at the base of Mount Elgon, very close to the Kenya-Uganda border. Yes.
Yes.
This is the
Okay.
western. Yeah, from my home, Nairobi, it is 8 hours by bus. So I'm in the far-flung side of the country, in the countryside.
Okay.
I run a non-profit, an NGO that works to build the capacities of vulnerable communities so they can live at peace. Yes.
Okay. What is your first name, Mr. Davidson?
Davidson is my first name. Davidson.
Davidson. What's your last name then?
Ahonya.
You're doing work. You're doing peace work. Is that right? You're running a project there. Tell us about your peace work. What is it you do?
Yes, my organization is called Mount Elgon Peace Initiative. We are at the base of a mountain called Mount Elgon. Mount Elgon is a volcanic mountain that lies on the border of Kenya and Uganda. And the tribal communities that live here rival each other for resources. The resources being a political representation, being land, and what have you. So I began this organization 5 years ago in response to the ethnically polarized politics that we have in Kenya. So we work with women and children. We teach them about nonviolent communication. We also operate a microcredit scheme and a village savings where we provide startup capital to women to enable them engage in small business enterprises in order to bolster their capacities for peaceful coexistence. Additionally, I am a charter president of the Rotary Club. I'm a member of Rotary Club here in my community where I'm the founding president. Rotary brings together professional and business people who want to give back to society. So that's what I do here. So I'm glad to be here on this wall with you and to network with people of like mind from across the world.
All right.
I'm married. Yes, I'm a father of 6. And my wife is called Jane Rose. She's now asleep. It is about 9:30 p.m. Here in Kenya. So many people are in bed.
All right. Well, welcome. It's very, very wonderful to have you join us. And your work sounds wonderful. And just yesterday, I think, or Friday, I had a talk show with a man about nuclear weapons. And one of the conversations, one of the things we agreed was that of all the groups doing things, organizations in the world doing really good work, the Rotary Club is very, very special. So send my good greetings to your fellow Rotarians, because we admire the work that the Rotary Club is doing in many parts of the world.
Right.
Very good.
Right.
Okay, so let's go back to our gallery view and take a look at who all is here. And does somebody else want to share something with us?
Hi, Meta.
Hi.
I joined a little bit late. I added a couple of links in the chat line, and they're both happening at the same time this week. But one is World Beyond War this Thursday evening, Militarism and Climate Justice, which will include an Indigenous speaker. And the other one is the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute, which has been revamped since last year and is quite militant. And also this Thursday evening, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, a Canada-wide talking about Canada's so-called feminine foreign policy. So they're both happening.
You have so many things that you're putting in the chat box, and nobody will see them there. What I hope you'll all do is go to our website called tosavetheworld.ca, because there we have an events listing. And you can post every one of those events there. And we have several hundred people who may very well see those where they won't see them here. So please do that. Always just make a habit of going to the website and entering your events. We're increasing our advertising of that website. And sometimes we've had up to I think 700 or 1,000 people a day who visited it. It depends on how much we spend on advertising, but because that's not the typical thing. It's more like 100 a day, typically. But nevertheless, you'll get a lot more attention there than any place else. Okay.
Thanks for letting me know. And Meta, you're probably aware of it, and it might be on your website, of the newly formed Canada-wide Peace and Justice Network.
I'm on the steering committee. Unfortunately,
Okay.
I'm not as, diligent about it as I should be. Thank you. Okay, now I think Ann Venton is next, and then Robert Reed.
Something that I think is important, and it seems to be getting a boost right now from the Canadian government and from NGOs like the David Suzuki Foundation and Equal Justice. The right to a clean environment is a human right, and the fact that the Canadian government may actually enshrine that right in the Canadian Constitution. So anything that we can do to support this effort, because it will have a lot of impact on our country and get us in line with other countries that in fact do have the right to a clean environment as a human right.
That's a very good idea.
Yeah, you can check out the Equal Justice website, the David Suzuki Foundation website,
Right.
or just use it as a heading in Google and find out lots of information. But we hope that this initiative goes forward as opposed to being dropped from the order paper if there is an election in the near future.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Let me go back to Mohammed for one thing. And that is, although I just mentioned to Margaret and some of the others that if you have an event to publicize, please do it on the events page. I also want to encourage you to use the comments columns, because to savetheworld.ca is a place where information should be shared. Now, Mohammed, if you go to that page and you look for the section on governance, there's a comments column there. And if you write down something, this information that you shared with us, if it's not too risky for you to do it, I mean, I can understand where it might be dangerous for you to do it.
No, I will do today.
But if you post that information, it will get some attention. And maybe not where we want it to, but I want to encourage everybody to enter your comments on the website in the comments columns, and because we do have some traffic, and we're going to have more as we begin to publicize the website more. So thank you. I should have said that a while back. Robert Reed.
Here I am.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. First, a point of order. You mentioned that we can't see things on chat, but we all have the little icon called chat on our screen, and we click that and we can see everything on the chat. I'm not sure where that website is you're telling us to put things, but we can all see the chat.
Yes, you can, but nobody else can.
What do you mean we all can?
No, yes, all of you who are on this show can see the chat.
Yes.
But this is being broadcast.
Oh.
And the people who watch it on Zoom or on YouTube or on Facebook or on our website will see the pictures of our conversation, each of us speaking, but you won't see the chat.
Oh.
So that if you want to share something, you have to say it.
I can see it because it's on Zoom. I'm on Zoom. I can see the chat.
You can, but later on when we post it on our website, the other people won't be able to see it.
Okay, where is the website?
It's called tosavetheworld.ca. And we want that to be a sort of a meeting place for people who do all kinds of activism and research on 6 global threats, not just peace, although most of us here are peace workers, but also, of course, global warming activists and people who are concerned about famine and pandemics and radioactive contamination and cyber risks. So when Mr. Muhammad was telling us about the cyber risks, that fits into a larger framework of threats about from bad governance and cyber threats. And so that's part of our bailiwick. Okay, so anybody who's an activist on any of those areas should be sharing, because we see these threats or issues as all causally interdependent, and therefore we're dealing with a system. And it's important to address problems systemically rather than just separately, as if we were not connected. Okay.
Rotary was mentioned by Davidson from Africa.
That's right.
And there is good news. I don't know if all or some of you are aware of Sheka Mehta, who is the president-elect of Rotary International, and he's already been making a splash with international talks concerning his theme of world peace for his upcoming year as international president of Rotary. He's from India, and his theme is world peace, and he says his goal is, if not now, eventually that Rotary could qualify for the Nobel Peace Prize. And so, you know, for the last 50 years, a major theme of Rotary International has been the elimination of polio. So now that that's just about complete, maybe the new one could be for Rotary International, elimination of nuclear weapons.
Well, you're not the first person who's thought of that. I'm hearing that of quite a bit. So it's a wonderful idea. And are you a Rotarian yourself?
Yes, I am, in Halifax, Nova Scotia.
All right, very good.
For me, especially living in a wealthy nation, the issue of vaccine equity for low and middle income countries is critical, and something I would hope that many more peace activists and people who are interested in justice in the world will pay a bit more attention to.
About a month ago or so, I had a talk show with a man who's the epidemics writer for Science magazine. So he's been covering this all along, and his complaint was that rich countries, the US and Canada, have ordered something like 500% as much vaccine as they can actually use. I mean, there are people.
Yeah, that's an accurate statement, yes.
And so he said, well, yes, you can see how they want to have a little extra now, because of course the US has done such a terrible job up to now in taking care of preventing the spread of the disease. But he said it takes time. If you're going to actually transfer some of your surplus, later on they'll have some left over, and then they'll be big-hearted and they'll say, yes, okay, here, let's give it to you. But he said, you need to plan these things in advance about how you're going to get it to the right people when you need it. That if you wait till the last minute, there are always logistic glitches that get in the way. So I think that maybe we should be urging Canada, as well as, of course, anybody in the US, to start being more proactive about planning how to be more equitable.
Far be it from me to actually say good things about the Canadian government, given my political alignment, but Canadian government, relative to the rest of the world, has been contributing to the COVAX facility. It's withdrawn from the COVAX, that is, it's pulled vaccines through the COVAX facility. But if we can encourage all governments that have ordered these excesses, and essentially the wealthy nations have all tried to, or including the EU, have tried to order excess vaccine for their local populations. What the World Health Organization is saying in terms of equity, of course, is that we must protect vulnerable populations, and especially healthcare workers who are on the front line, if we're addressing equitably the pandemic. And in that context, I think the way the Canadian government is organizing itself, it will, once it's finished the first major round of vaccinations, transfer the rights for purchase as well as funds. Canada's contributed disproportionately a large amount to the funding of the COVAX facility.
William Browett, what is your political leaning? Because you referred to it and didn't say what it was.
I'm a lifer NDP.
Oh, all right, good for you. Now we see your perspective. What I wanted to mention was to do with with Biden's climate change world meeting this past week, and in it, quite a few countries, all of the major important ones, pledged all for carbon neutral by 2050. The pledges towards 2030 compared with 2005 levels varied a bit. Biden pledged 50% by 2030, and Trudeau pledged 40 to 45% by 2030. And then whereupon our new Green Party leader said Canada should be aiming at 60% by 2030, not 40 to 45%. But in contrast to what Mr. Browett was saying, the Canadian government has been for 5 years, and planning before that. They're active, if you list them all, on about 50 different kinds of measures, all to do with climate change. But they're proceeding on all of the major ones, namely the conversion to 100% electrical vehicles as soon as possible, hopefully by the 2030s, and creation of all of the electricity supplying those vehicles and everything else being none produced by fossil fuels. That's the 2050 goal, but they have to get a long ways towards it by 2030. Our former head of the Bank of Canada and then the Bank of England is now working on the Amazon has started a climate change project with $10 billion.
Is that Carney or who?
Carney, absolutely, Carney. And where he's coming from, they're getting all of the world's biggest investment companies to stop investing in fossil fuels and investing in renewable energy.
In one sentence, my concern is with biodiversity, which is as great a threat as climate change, but almost unrecognized.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Davidson in Kenya will know something of what I'm talking about, because there are all kinds of land grabs going on in various parts of the world. People are being chased out of their home areas by armed guards. And this is presented to us as saving the world, but in fact, it's doing indigenous peoples and local populations out of their basic livelihood.
Thank you. I wanted to come back on this issue of COVID-19 and COVAX. We heard a very good exposition on that, but COVAX is meant to cover only 20% of the population in the poorer countries of the world. And to date, according to the WHO, vast majority of the vaccinations have been delivered in only 10 or 15 countries. There are many, many countries in the world where not a single arm has got a COVID-19 jab in it, and some countries are basically looking at waits of a few years. And it's, from my point of view, it's really regrettable that the European Union, the UK, and the US are firmly opposing at the World Trade Organization the breaking of the patents on the formulas for these 3 or 4 major corona vaccines, most of which were brought to the market and developed with large chunks of taxpayer money. And already Pfizer-BioNTech has indicated to the European Union that starting in a few months, the price per vaccine for the EU will be raised by 60%. So in my view, this is just sheer profiteering and excessive profits at a time when the entire world is suffering from a pandemic. And just because people in the US, Canada, and the European Union may be vaccinated doesn't mean that the rest of the world is safe. And as the Director General of the WHO very correctly has said, no one is safe until everyone is safe. So here we have, a highest example of capitalist greed, where even where millions of people are affected, hundreds of thousands are dying, profits still are more important than making some exceptions for the well-being of humankind.
Somebody is breaking the patents. I don't know anything about that. What's going on there?
So there is a request by South Africa and India that the patent protection for the corona vaccine be removed, so that the many pharmaceutical companies around the world that have the capability to manufacture vaccines can manufacture these vaccines domestically for their populations at low cost and make them available. But the patent holders of Pfizer, BioNTech, AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, they are refusing to allow copies of their vaccines be made in generic form. And most of the world benefits from pharmaceuticals made by generic copies, not by branded pharmaceuticals. And as you know, in Canada, we have one of the highest rates of paying for pharmaceutical drugs covered by the national or provincial health plans. Mm-hmm. And again, it's the pharmaceutical companies that, at least in the case of the coronavirus, they ought to act for the greater good of humankind around the world when the entire world is suffering. It's sort of surprising that the developed countries still want to protect the pharmaceutical companies. And it's not surprising because these pharmaceutical companies make big political campaign payoffs to politicians of all parties. Now, fortunately, AstraZeneca, which was developed by Oxford University, the university has said that they are doing it on a cost recovery basis and they will not make any profits on it. But AstraZeneca is still a commercial company, so we don't know how that will pan out. But Pfizer, BioNTech is the vaccine that has been administered in the largest numbers. And as I mentioned, for the EU, they're going to raise the price per dose by 60%. And of course, it's going to happen for other countries with other percentages. And I don't see a protest movement from ordinary people saying that, this is unfair.
I noticed that Bill Browett was typing something into the chat, agreeing with you. And I know that, Bill, your life career has been in the pharmaceutical industry. Do you feel like going public with your approval and agreement with Tariq, or is this, am I asking too much of you?
I think you already outed me, didn't you?
I just outed you, yes.
Volunteering, and this is all by volunteering, not to take a profit in the manufacture, but with others, as Terry mentioned, you have to read the fine print. And in their case, they won't make a profit with some countries, but they might with other countries. And it's certainly unclear with respect to the supplying of the COVAX facility, what those relationships are. And so there are all these individual contracts that are being negotiated, which has obviously worked against the country, COVAX facility, and low and middle income countries that don't have the wherewithal to negotiate with big pharma. Having said that, I think this is an opportunity for the world to really think about what patents mean, especially as Tariq touched on. A lot of the research, just focusing on the research, is publicly funded around the world. very little, in fact, isn't publicly funded. It's the development piece that may or may not be publicly funded. So when the pharmaceutical industries are talking about the sanctity of patents, they're talking about the sanctity of patents in the manufacturing process, because big pharma is primarily they're organizations of manufacturers, not of, and directing the funding around R&D, but not of supplying the R&D funding. It's all very complex.
All of the risk goes elsewhere, and all of the profits go into
absolutely standard capitalism.
Of course, we've seen the impacts of One Health and how disease can go around the world with COVID-19 in the past year. But even as early as 2013, and even perhaps before that, with other historic pandemics, I just want to draw people's attention to the Zika situation back in 2013, when that disease was first detected in French Polynesia in late 2013. Steps should have been taken to mitigate or prevent the traveling of infected parties between the South Pacific and the Latin American games. And that was one of the main routes that this virus got to.
There is one group that is being almost systematically excluded from vaccination, and that is migrants, people on the move, particularly undocumented migrants. We're also hearing, by the way, on top of all of that, about a tuberculosis epidemic in the Greek islands, which is not being reported anywhere. And this would be expected, this kind of thing. We should expect more diseases coming on top of the COVID because of the weakened immune systems of people.
You're making announcements that we do want to share more widely. And although we get quite a few people watching these shows, you'll get a better response if you also enter this information as a comment and go to our website and look for the section on pandemics and say, these people in the Greek islands are having a bad time and there's tuberculosis there. That I don't know who's going to find that out otherwise.
The other thing that we must think about in terms of COVID-19 is not only the physical sides of it, but the mental health sides of it. And that is going to go on for generations because that will be the subject of transgenerational transmission. Huge numbers of people are having severe mental health consequences, which is a vicious circle and which causes, again, physical ailments. And all of this is being transmitted and will be transmitted to the coming generations. As far as I see it, nobody is really doing mental health work on COVID-19 now. And the situation on the Greek islands is absolutely despicable. They are building what the new camps that they are building on places like Chios and Lesbos are in effect prisons.
What's the word for the Refugee Committee of the UN? I would have thought
UNHCR.
it was their business and they would be in control of the situation.
They're not. Well, they are, but the EU and the infamous Frontex, which is the border police unit of the European Union, is doing some absolutely horrible stuff with pushbacks, and they're letting it happen. Also, the whole search and rescue thing. I don't know if you got this, but 130 people died in one incident a couple of days ago.
Where?
On the Mediterranean.
In a boat. Yeah, I saw that this morning. Yeah.
Yes. And that's
where were they going and what happened? Do you know who they were?
I think they were coming from Libya. From Libya trying to get to I think to Italy, to Sicily, or to Lampedusa or one of those places. And there are pictures of the broken up boats. The EU is discouraging search and rescue missions. They are criminalizing saving people.
Come on. Don't tell me that. Come on. How could you possibly do that? What happened?
There have been prosecutions in Italy and Malta in particular, but also in other places, of these search and rescue boats and of the captains and all the rest.
I mean, what law have they broken, for Pete's sake?
You tell me.
Well, then if they're law cases, they must have broken a law.
Yeah, I think it has to do with illegal entry to the country or some such.
Libya to the EU, if they got to the island of Lampedusa,
That's right.
it would be considered that they were refugees on EU territory. In this case, the Italian and other navies would try and intercept the boats before they got to the land and take them back to Libya. And in this case, this is also being seen in the Greek area and the Turkish area of the Mediterranean.
Exactly.
And it's also, we've seen it as well in Ceuta and Gibraltar areas in Melilla, this enclaves on the North African coast. If they can get into those EU-controlled territories on the mainland, they can refugees can declare themselves political asylum. So the boats, they really want to prevent them from making land.
And it's now happening in the Canary Islands as well.
What in the world should happen? Doesn't the UN refugee, what's it called?
What?
I can't remember what the acronym of the UN body that's supposed to handle
UNHCR.
Thank you.
UNHCR.
Now, shouldn't they have some authority to somehow intervene when human lives are being jeopardized by that kind of national policy? Any country that does that should, I don't know what should happen to them, but they shouldn't be allowed to get away with it. And we should have some way of making sure they can't get away with it.
I agree with you completely. And in fact, some of the Croatians are being prosecuted in the International Criminal Court. And the ombudsman for the Council of Europe has stated that what's happening here in Croatia with the pushbacks is absolutely abominable. 25 kilometers from here, there are drones and there are all kinds of cameras on the Serbian border. Actually, the Serbian border is 100 meters from here on the Danube River. And people who are trying to get across. What's happening in Hungary?
Hold on. Wait a minute. There are people in Serbia trying to cross the river into Croatia?
Of course.
And who are these? These are who?
These are people who have come up through the Balkan, what is called the Balkan route. So in other words, they go via Turkey to Greece, if they can get through. Then they get into either North Macedonia or Albania. Then they get into Serbia and or Bosnia. And then they try and get into Croatia and go further.
Now, there's other countries, it's easy. And then they get to Croatia and they can't do it, huh?
No, well, Croatia is the EU border. Croatia is the European Union border.
The EU border. Okay, got it. Okay, and Serbia is not in the EU, so that's
Not yet, anyway. The Croatians are infamous with this.
Can the UN do anything to swat the EU down?
The International Criminal Court, the Court of Human Rights in Luxembourg, is trying to do a little bit, but it's not really working.
Yeah.
Would it help if some of the countries that have not been overwhelmed with refugees opened their borders more and agreed to take more refugees so that the entrance countries would not feel as overwhelmed?
If we were just the best in the world, there's this COVID limitation of being able to accept them now.
One more thing here, by the way, Barbara, even though the EU needs farm workers just like Canada does, would you believe that Denmark and Germany are deporting refugees to Syria?
No.
And to Afghanistan?
Oh, no. Oh, no.
The governments do not want refugees. That's very clear. Okay, COVID is a good excuse for it. 95% of the people on the Balkan route have been tortured.
By whom?
Essentially, 3 places where people are undergoing psychological and physical torture. One is in the country of origin, the region of origin. The second is underway. And the third is in the country of supposed residence.
Let me make the same pitch that I've done in previous times, because what you are saying is that you could take anybody who is decent, a normal person who probably a lot of us have spare time that we can't use because we're trapped at home and we're not going out and doing the things we used to do. And probably there are people watching this who could become therapists. They get in touch with you, you train them, and by Zoom or whatever, they can take off some of the load of helping reach these people who are suffering. And mostly it's a matter of listening to them, right?
Absolutely.
Therapy is largely just giving a good listening ear to people who've been through hell. Mm-hmm. So I want to encourage people to give some thought to that. If you have some spare time, get in touch with Charles Tauber, and I'll put his link at the end of this show so that people watching it who are not here on with us on this screen will also have a chance to reach out to you and offer.
Please do.
Okay.
Please do.
That'd be good.
What Charles is reporting goes far beyond a few rogue states on the edge of Europe or a few rogue policemen. This is a concerted, multinational effort to keep everything out of sight, and if necessary, they kill people.
Also, a lot of Bangladeshi refugees, they are dying on the sea because in conflict in Bangladesh, there are few people getting job and benefit of the government. So elites are control, corrupt people control Bangladesh. So we want international community urgent intervention in Bangladesh.
Thank you. I'm so glad you're posting some information on those comments columns. I'd encourage you all to go have a look, read the comments, and add your own responses. You may have ideas that would be useful. So bless you all. It's we're over our 4 p.m. termination point, and some people have things they're going to do with the rest of their day. So
could the chat line be preserved by you? Could the chat line be preserved by you and sent?
You can take the chats and post them as a comment so that you can read all of that. Go to the website to savetheworld.ca, and let's say under talk shows or under videos, we'll have a place where you can read comments and share more information. We'll post the chats there. Okay. Bye, folks.